Hello and welcome to another segment of Western Wisconsin Journal. I'm Jamie Johnson, the legal and government correspondent, and today is a frequent guest on the show, somebody I've worked with for over 5 years now, and Superintendent of the Hudson School District, Dr. Nick Ouellette. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, we set this meeting up, or this interview up a couple weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, knowing that this is going to be the day after a big school board meeting regarding the fall reopening plan. And so something that us board members have been getting tons of emails about, both before and even since last night's meeting. I thought today that what we talk about is just basically the process for developing the plan, what were some of the guiding principles, questions that were into it. I mean, and people can be referred to, our website where the plan is now being posted, as well as the results of the survey that the school district did. So with that, I want to, let's start with the process. We knew that from the minute that school was suspended in the spring that there would be questions about how we reinitiate learning in the fall. So why don't you walk us through what the processes have been and what authorities you've been looking to for guidance?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you talked about, when things close in the fall or in the spring, the big question is, how do you ever reopen and what does that look like? We spent a lot of time kind of waiting early on, May and June, trying to see what kind of guidance we'd get out of the state and the governor's office. Obviously, when the Supreme Court ruling happened, it did create some challenges because it basically took it from a state level kind of decision to make most of the decisions more at the local level. With that being said, that puts a lot more on our plate and trying to weigh different models and different things that we have to do. So we went on, and what we did early on, probably towards the end of June, is we started to look at, middle of June maybe, okay, what are all of the things all of the different areas that we have to answer, questions we have to answer as it relates to school, and what does that entail? And we came up with about 55 or 60 different areas that we needed to have answers to, or we needed to plan for in order to reopen our buildings in the fall, and what does that look like? From there, we had created that document that kind of listed it all, but then we also wanted to look at who should be involved in that decision process, and how do we do that? And so we've included teachers, we've included school nurses, we've included a variety of district folks as we've looked at that. We've also surveyed parents to get feedback from parents. We've talked to the board on multiple occasions to get some feedback as we're moving forward to kind of all put all of this together. And so that's really been a lot of the legwork that was happening behind the scenes. A lot of people were saying, what are you going to do? What's your decision? How are you going to open in the fall? And so all of those things were happening in order to lead us to what's called, the blueprint, so to speak, the back to school blueprint for the Hudson School District. And that's what we released last night to the board and that the board approved. But as you're bringing all these different groups together and you're thinking about all these different stakeholders, one of the things that we wanted to make sure that we did is that we set the lens in which we wanted people to look at the decisions that we needed to make. And, we came up with these guiding principles pretty early on, and it's in the plan, and I can screen share.
I was just going to suggest maybe we do a screen share at this point, because now that the plan, folks can, by the way, all they have to do is go to HudsonRaiders.org.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, HudsonRaiders.org, and right at the top of our homepage is the red banner. It says, the back to school blueprint, and it also says COVID news as it relates to school district. I'm screen sharing with you. Can you guys see the plan now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, there's a superintendent's message, and I think the big piece with that is just understanding that, hey, it's a tough situation. It's a fluid situation. Bear with us. These are really the things that we're planning as of right now, but they could definitely change. But as I was talking about earlier, the guiding principles component was really about, like I said, what lens do we want people to look through? And the key things that I think people have to understand is, as a belief structure for us in the district, we believe that curricular, co-curricular, extracurricular opportunities and experiences are vitally important to the well-being of our kids. And so, a lot of times the easy button is just to say no, or the easy button is just to close, or the easy button sometimes is we can't do these things. And so what we wanted to do is that we wanted to make sure that we were looking at, is there a way to do certain things, even if it means we got to change them? So as we continue to work through the guiding principles, we also say that, we believe that educating the whole child is important. And in order to do that, we need to have face-to-face interactions, and we need to be able to look at what that looks like. We also believe that providing opportunities for kids can be, not providing them can be detrimental long-term. So there are studies out there that have shown that when schools close for long periods of time, it can have long-lasting impact on kids. And so we also believe that it is our responsibility to try to mitigate the risk associated with the spread of COVID-19. And we do take that responsibility very seriously. And so as we look at all of these different components, that's the lens we wanted people to kind of have in the back of their mind as they're talking about these decisions.
Well, I think that last point on that guiding principles is also really important, because it does take kind of a village to raise kids, and it takes a full team with the families, students, and the staff all on board, because administration can recommend a plan, the board can give its stamp of approval to the plan, but if people aren't working together to put that into action, it's not going to be successful.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, this is really needs to be a partnership. In order for this to work, in order for us to keep schools open, we all have to be working together to try to make this happen. We went on, as we went through this, and we went on to talk about decision-making questions. I'm not going to go through these, but they're in the plan. But basically, what are the things we want to make sure we're asking ourselves or asking the group as we're looking at making these decisions, so that we're not, forgetting certain things or creating some blind spots that we don't quite take into account when we're making these decisions.
Okay. So, and it says, what have we learned from feedback from our community members? And you alluded to a survey, and what were just examples of some of the things on that survey, and who did it go to?
Well, the survey went to parents and staff, and really we were asking parents, would they feel comfortable sending their kids to school come September 1st for face-to-face instruction? And we had about 76% of our parents said yes, they would feel comfortable. We had about 3.5% to 4% of our parents said no, they would not feel comfortable. And we had about another 20% that said, I need more information. I'm undecided on this right this moment. And so, that's where we're hoping that the plan provides people with the information that they need to be able to really drill down to make that decision.
Okay, now we're not going to go through, this is a document that's I think 26 slides long. We're not going to go through every slide.
Correct.
But just if you could hit the highlights, so to speak, Nick, of the meat and potatoes of the plan is number one, that the face-to-face instruction is, well, before we get to that, I guess you should explain what these areas are, how it's categorized, the plan. When people
so the plan is really categorized into 4 different areas, operations, instruction, support services, and then programs, activities, and events. And so really it's kind of breaking down all those different components. You talk about what is the plan instructionally coming back, and we'll kind of jump around a little bit. So our plan, our recommendation to the board, and the board approved last night, is that as of right now, as we sit, and again, these things can change because it's a very fluid environment, is our plan would be to bring all of our kids back to our buildings 5 days a week for regular instruction, with reasonable mitigation strategies in place to mitigate the risk associated with coming back to both our kids and to our staff. And so a couple of highlighted points, we are going to be working on physical distancing, changing the way we do some of our physical spaces. We'll have some increased cleaning and ventilation and things along those lines. But again, you'll be able to, if you want to go through the plan, you'll be able to see a lot more information about those components, and we'll be putting that information out. When we talk about the day-to-day, the screening expectations, that's really kind of that first part of where that partnership comes into play if we are to go to face-to-face instruction. And what that is really working with parents, working with staff so that they are screening kids and they're screening themselves to make sure that if they're starting to have any symptoms related to COVID-19, that they contact the school before coming in and that, they take their appropriate precautions. And so that's that partnership piece where we really need parents to be vigilant about that at home. And that really helps us in order to maintain our schools and be able to keep ourselves open long term.
Now, Nick, right here, I just want to stop and note for folks that if people want to watch, because this presentation that you and your staff did last night for the school board, it was over a 2-hour discussion. And we're not going to take 2 hours now to discuss all these details, but just so that folks know it wasn't just a quick run through. There was a lot of hard questions asked on some of these slides, some of these aspects to it that you're going to be touching on. But if people want to get the full breadth and depth of that discussion, they can just go online and watch the meeting from last night, which was July 20th.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. I'm just going to try to give you some high level items, right now, but yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, it might even have been close to 3 hours, Jamie. I mean, the board did a really great job putting us through our paces to make sure that we were solid on our planning. And to be quite honest, my team has been outstanding all the way through this, and the district's team to make sure that, we have thought through a lot of these recommendations and where they're coming from as we move forward. So absolutely. So one of the big high level items, obviously that, it can be kind of controversial at times, is face covering / mask. And so the recommendation, which was adopted, is that, face coverings and masks are required indoors except when physical distancing is possible. And, we know that this is a big expectation, but it really comes down to this. It's not about, I feel a certain way about masks, or I feel a certain way about whether I should have one or not have one. It comes down to the fact that we're trying to put things in place that we think are reasonable, and we believe masks are reasonable, or face coverings, that will allow us to keep our schools open. That's the bottom line. I don't like wearing a mask any more than anybody else. As you noted last night, the meeting, I think the whole meeting went about almost 4 hours. And because we were all face to face, we had masks on, and it's a long time to have masks on, and it's uncomfortable, and I totally understand that. But at the end of the day, having face coverings or masks is about keeping our buildings open. And one of the reasons, people say, well, with kids, COVID isn't as big of an impact. Well, really, one of our most vulnerable populations we have in our buildings is our staff, because they are going to be the most vulnerable to COVID. And so by putting masks on kids and staff, what we're saying is, we care enough to try to minimize the spread as much as we possibly can in order to keep our buildings open. And masks are not about the person wearing it. And, I know we've been inundated with emails about how, masks won't protect you from this or that, but the research is pretty clear as far as masks protecting others. And so the mask requirement that came out is more about how do we protect others from people that may have the disease or the virus than it is about wearing a mask to protect you from getting it. And so, we had a lot of discussion about this, I think, last night. And, as the board president, you may, have some thoughts on it right now that maybe you want to bring up.
Well, yeah. You're right, Nick. We did get a ton of emails on this issue, and in fact, both sides were circulating petitions in a fairly short period of time.
Yeah.
I think one petition against the masks had a couple hundred signatures, and then there was 400 signatures in favor of masks. But it really didn't come up in the discussion that the board was basically wetting its finger and holding it in the air, and whichever side was blowing the wind the hardest was going to win the day. There's a lot, the administration provided us with a lot of links. Board members did a lot of research on their own, spent hours on this. And in the end, I guess we must have landed at someplace fairly decent, because by 8 a.m. this morning, I already had 3 emails from people who had watched the meeting the night before. And one complimented us on the great job we did and how thoughtful the conversation was. One of them was disappointed and amazed that we were exposing the children to such great harm by not following the CDC guidelines strictly word for word, and then followed immediately after that was an email from a parent who was concerned that we were exposing their kids to harm by requiring them to wear masks. And so we had, one saying we were being too strict, one saying we were not being strict enough, and then, but the vast majority, as I understand on social media, which I don't follow that closely, but folks seem to be understand that we're trying to be reasonable here and trying to make something work that gets the economy back going, and that includes trying to keep our students' education as strong as it can with reasonable mitigation for safety factors. So,
and you hit the nail on the head. I mean, I can't remember if I touched on this earlier, but it is about reducing risk. It's not about providing a safe environment, because we can't. The word "safe" in and of itself, basically it means, absence of any type of problems or challenges or risk. And so our goal is to try to reduce risk or mitigate risk. You'll hear that throughout the plan. You hear that throughout our conversations. We're purposely trying not to use the word safe, because we can't guarantee 100% safety, and we can't guarantee a COVID-free environment when school opens, regardless of what we do.
I think maybe if you go to the slide where you talk about what happens if there is a positive test. And
absolutely.
So that's the very next slide, I guess.
The very next slide. So if there is a positive test in our district, one of the things that we're committed to doing is the transparency with communication. So at the elementary level, if there's a positive case in one of the buildings, every parent in that building will get an email. They'll say, we've had a positive case. We'll identify the classroom of the confirmed case. So, third grade, Mr. Smith's class type of thing. So parents have a way of understanding at least, okay, where is that? In the email, it also will explain that, if your child is a close contact of the positive case, you will have been contacted by St. Croix County Public Health. If not, if you don't get contacted within 24 hours by St. Croix County Public Health, then it's safe to assume that your child is not considered a close contact related to that case. At the middle school, it starts to get a little different. There will be a building-wide letter sent identifying the grade level and then the house, because we're in houses at the middle school. And then at the high school, it'll be a building-wide letter sent identifying the grade level of the confirmed case. Any of the activities or events that we have going on, whether it be an elementary event or activity or middle school or high school, essentially we'll be sending a building-wide letter of the impacted building or level, letting people know where the confirmed case was, provided there are at least 10 kids that are participating in that activity. And the reason behind that is because we want to maintain anonymity due to data privacy, so that specific individuals are not called out and violating their HIPAA protection.
Okay, so one of the criticisms that we have faced already, before we get to the transportation, but it's about this idea of confirming COVID cases. And I think we've discussed this last night, that it's not really a matter of if we're ever going to get a COVID-19 confirmed diagnosis within the entire district with 5,500 students and over 800 employees. It's just a matter of when and how many. But one of the criticisms, do you have in place a definitive number, like if we get this many positive cases, or if we get the first student who's hospitalized or whatever, what's going to trigger a change? Because you mentioned earlier, this is a plan that's fluid. We're still 6 weeks out from opening school. What happens if circumstances change?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have a end-all be-all metric or one data point that we're looking at. We are trying to gauge, looking at multiple data points. We're working with St. Croix County Public Health, having conversations with them. We'll be looking at our own school-wide data and trying to keep those things up to date and making sure that we're taking those things into consideration. So, yeah, I mean, there is not, at this point, there's not, okay, if we hit a certain threshold, automatically schools close, or if we hit a certain threshold, automatically we move on to this mitigation method. I will say that one of the things that is a certainty is we have to be able to staff our buildings. So if we start to get to a point where we have the inability to staff our buildings because of widespread COVID, and we're having to have people quarantine and things along those lines, that's when you'll start to see some of those decisions happening. But we consider schools being an essential business, an essential function, and about as essential as it gets, other than maybe our healthcare providers. And so we're really going to try to look at this from that standpoint. We want to be reasonable, but there will be a lot of different data points we're going to continue to try to monitor. That's one of the struggling situations that we have right now in the state, and I think really across the country, is everybody has kind of an idea of what they think the indicators should look like, or they have an idea of what levels things should be at, and a lot of them are very conflicting. And so trying to figure out what makes the most sense for the Hudson School District.
Well, and I think you just hit the nail on the head with what makes sense for the Hudson School District, because we talked about, there's the countywide public health, but if there were to be an outbreak in a nursing home on the eastern end of the county, I won't name a specific community because I don't want to point fingers where it's supposed to, but name your community that's 25, 30 miles away from here. And if they were to have a widespread outbreak of cases in a nursing home, does that mean that we have to shut down, Hudson schools or go to greater mitigation levels?
Yeah, and I think that's the big piece on this, and I think that's why it's an ongoing conversation. It's not as cut and dry as people would like. We saw that very early on in the pandemic. I mean, what was happening in the southeast part of the state was very different than what was happening in the northwest part of the state. And so it is going to be an ongoing discussion. I know people want to be able to say, I want to track this and I want to know when we're going to hit these different thresholds. But right now, that's going to be an ongoing discussion with public health.
Right. And I want to point out, when people look at this plan, if they look over on the left side of every slide, it talks in there about where the guidelines and what authority was consulted. And you see Department of Public Instruction. And you mentioned earlier that there was basically a 3-month wait to see what the DPI was going to recommend. And when those recommendations came out near the end of June, that was just it. They were recommendations that were a fairly bit of one size fits all. And what may be true for Dane County or Milwaukee County or Brown County is not necessarily going to be true for St. Croix.
Yeah, it's absolutely right. And I think, we are, as you go through the slides, like I said, and those different departments or those different organizations do change based on the different parts of the slides and different things that we're looking at.
All right. So one of the other big areas, I think, is transportation. We might need to hit on that one.
Yeah, so student transportation, we will be requiring students, drivers, and bus aides to wear a face covering / mask on the bus. We are going to assign seats. We're going to try to have families grouped together. And we're going to disinfect between routes and increase ventilation. So try to do the things that we think we can do that are reasonable and still get our kids to school. Some people say, well, are you going to double the amount of bus routes or things like that? No, we're not going to do those things. We believe the buses will be running at a much lower capacity. We've had, just through our family survey, we've had a lot of people tell us that, hey, they're not planning on sending their kid on the bus. And so, there's going to be some reduction in student ridership just through those things as well. Okay.
So what else, what other aspects to the plan do you want to, I suppose meals is going to be another area.
Meals, just to touch on, we're going to be limiting choices. We're going to be running our cafeterias at 50% capacity. We're just going to try to do some reasonable things that we think that will help keep some of those crowded areas down. I think that, the big piece, as you work through this plan, the staff training, we're going to be working with our staff and working with them to be able to identify kids that maybe be displaying symptoms or signs of COVID-19 and what they do with that, and also any other types of trainings that they need. The big piece I think that came up last night that's important is, as I said, we're planning on going on site in person to start the school year as of right now. And again, that's as of right now. Teachers and students will follow their typical schedule. Classroom furniture will be arranged in a way to try to maximize social distancing. And we will have to modify some of our some of our practices and what we do. And, it might be field trips or other things like that. We did have a meeting about recess today. Recess is considered kind of a low risk environment. It's outside. It's not for a long period of time. Kids aren't right next to each other the whole time. And so we think recess is going to look pretty similar to the way it does now. But really the thing that's going to change is how kids move in and out of recess and how they gather and do some of those things. But I think the things that's important to remember is if people don't feel comfortable with on-site coming face-to-face, they don't feel comfortable sending their kids, we will have individual distance learning. And really what that is the ability for kids to learn along with their class in real time. So it'll be a synchronous environment. So it'll be in real time. They'll be able to interact with their teacher in real time. So, for example, if you're a freshman in high school and you have Algebra 1 first period, the expectation is if you're online, if you're virtual and not coming to face-to-face instruction, that you're getting on your computer and you're seeing your teacher interact and you're able to interact with your teacher, at the normal first hour time period. And the same thing for second hour and third hour. And some people will argue, well, gosh, that's a lot of screen time for kids. I don't really like that. You know what? I don't like it either. And I don't like wearing masks, and I don't like not being able to let kids play sports at times. And I don't like, a lot of things, but it's what we think is reasonable to do in an effort to keep kids learning and to keep schools open and do what we need to do and give families options. And so, is it ideal? Absolutely not. However, we think this will allow our kids to be able to move in and out of the face-to-face and virtual, because we will have cases, like you said, Jamie, we will have cases where kids are going to be expected to quarantine. We want them to be able to stay up with their class, stay up with their teachers, and not all of a sudden have to, get a whole nother set of teachers to learn for the 14 days they're out and then try to get back to where their class was when they come back in. And so the other piece that we heard a lot from parents as we got feedback is, especially for our littlest learners, the synchronous plan provides more direction for our kids, because it can be really hard where, yes, teachers can provide lesson plans and things like that for the littlest kids, but without the parent there to read them to them, they start to become useless on some of those pieces. And so then the last piece of our plan, the third piece, is virtual learning. And it's very similar to the distance learning, but the virtual learning essentially is if we have to shut down a school, a grade level, the district in general, or if we are shut down, that's when this part of the plan kicks in and what that looks like. So it'll be a combination of synchronous and asynchronous instruction if we have to go to that model. The grading for all of the models, we would expect our assessments to be, as they would as if we were in person. We won't be recommending the pass, no pass grades. It'll be graded work like we would if we were having regular school days.
And if you could, Nick, just touch upon here at this point, because when you talked about we plan on, as of now, being on-site, face-to-face instruction 5 days a week at all levels. But the DPI recommendation talked about 2 days a week for half the student population and 2 days a week for the other half, with 1 day off for cleaning and so forth. And, we've heard, I don't want to say rumor, but we've heard hearsay that maybe at least one school district in this region is going to go to that modified level where it's part virtual learning and part in person. So briefly explain why our plan is to start 5 days a week in person rather than at that mixed level.
Well, I think that the biggest reason for that is we're really hoping that we can get as many days of face-to-face instruction in as we possibly can this year. We don't know if all of a sudden November, December, January is going to roll around and we're going to have to go 100% virtual. And so we know that the face-to-face instruction is very important. And so we know that that's our big push. The majority, I would say 90% of the school districts in the area are running a very similar plan to ours. And there will be a handful of districts that are going to do, as you talked about, what DPI had put out there as a possibility. And it's not that it's a terrible plan that they put out, or terrible recommendations. It's just we feel right now at this time, what's best for the Hudson School District and our kids is to try to get as much face-to-face time as we possibly can, as early as we can, to really set the tone and get things up and running. So,
and if there was a reason for backing off the 5 days a week, going to that modified schedule would still be an option then.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can absolutely go to those modified schedules and make adjustments and do different mitigation techniques to try to reduce the risk. But yeah, so it's not a either all or nothing. But we also know that by going only partial days or only certain days, it does create a tremendous burden on our parents and even our staff that have young children. If they're not in school every day, but yet parents are expected to work every day, that really creates some real challenges for them. And so, one of the thoughts that as we were looking at it is, okay, if kids are going to be off part of the time and then they're just going to go to some type of childcare facility during that time, we might as well have them in school. We might as well have them learning and working to the best of our ability. As far as the deep cleaning, days off for deep cleaning, really, we're upping our cleaning every day. So it's not just about deep cleaning a day of the week. Because one thing we do know is you could have a child that's asymptomatic or maybe just starting to show symptoms, and on Tuesday or Wednesday and their last day of school, maybe it was Thursday, and we don't find out that they had a positive COVID test until potentially the following Monday or Tuesday. Well, we will have had kids in those rooms for days after that kid's last day, and so we want to make sure that we're cleaning kind of as we go. And so not necessarily saying, hey, let's save our deep cleaning for 1 day a week. We're really trying to do the deep clean almost every single day as we work through that.
Right. And certainly at the high school, I mean, we have janitors round the clock at our larger buildings.
Absolutely. Our larger buildings, we're running custodians 3 shifts, 7 days a week. So there's always people in those buildings.
All right. We've got a few minutes to kind of bring it together. Some of these areas are self-explanatory, but this again, back to this teamwork concept, this teacher-family communication. Just talking a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's really going to be vital that we keep that line of communication open, and that the teachers are working with parents and making sure that we're doing everything we can to have good communication with kids. We're trying to work to make sure that teachers are responding to parents in the most timely manner that we can. We're also looking to say, okay, how do we streamline communications? One of the concerns or one of the feedback we had from the virtual instruction in the spring was, hey, I have a 7th grader and I have a 9th grader and I have an 11th grader, and I'm getting 21 emails a day about what they're supposed to be doing. And, it's like an overload. And so we're really looking at ways that we can streamline that and make it easier for staff and make it easier also than more for the parents.
Okay. I know we get down towards the bottom, there's the, school age care is another area because, again, it's really an area we haven't really let up. We were providing school age care even when the schools closed down. And why don't you just talk a little bit about how that might be impacted, but why the decision was to continue on some level the school age care?
Yeah, we kept school age care open for kind of tier 1 employees out there, healthcare professionals, first responders. We wanted to make sure that we could provide them with childcare, so as they had to go into work regardless, with schools being closed, we did that. And we kept them open all the way through the school closure. And now we've ramped back up to our normal school age care summer care that we do. And we'll continue to operate, following a lot of the same precautions and same thoughts that we're doing with the regular school day. All
right. And then we get to athletics, community events, and explain why that plan has not been finalized yet.
Yeah. So community events, I think you're going to see scaled back community events. I mean, we may not be able to allow spectators like we normally would. Some events and competitions we may not be allowed to have. As far as the WIA goes in sports and athletics, they're going to be making a decision, I think, by the end of day Thursday as to what do fall sports look like. If we can have fall sports, are they going to be delayed? Are they going to get moved to another part of the year? What does that look like? And once we find that out on Thursday, then we'll be able to kind of more, flesh out more parts of the sports plan or the athletic offerings as we work through it. But they really, we're really pushing them. We really want a statewide solution to this with the WIA. And so, like I said, Thursday, we anticipate hearing from them as to what their expectations will be.
And then on the next slide, again, co-curriculars, there's some that may be able to continue, others may have to be drastically cut back.
Yeah, I mean, and our co-curriculars range everywhere from, marching band and certain choir and things like that to different clubs and activities that we have going on. So there are some things that even if we have to go to virtual learning where we're not face-to-face at all, we'll still be able to continue those. And so really, as we talked about, the name of the game as it relates to our planning and then the fully operationalizing our plan is to be flexible and be fluid as we move forward, and that's going to be pretty important.
Okay, so upcoming dates then, we've got next action school board meeting is almost 3 weeks out. That's August 10th, and then teachers start coming back, fall sports start opening up, and so forth. So just in the next 3 weeks, there could be quite a few changes to this.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've been running our summer school programming and school age care programming that started back July 6th. We have 1,000+ kids in our buildings right now that we've been trying to reduce the risk for them but still offer them opportunities. And so we'll continue to refine things based on what we see from what we've been doing, things that have been working, things that haven't been working, and continue to work through that. But, as additional guidance comes out from the state on different items, we'll be making adjustments to our plans and trying to make sure that we're doing what we believe are reasonable mitigation steps to reduce our risk for our kids and our staff.
All right. So how can parents, community members follow, how the plan may be evolving, or if there are changes to it? How are they going to know that?
So if I think major changes that are going to happen to the plan is we'll be communicating that out with the parents of our district. We will always keep things up to date on our website. There'll be a banner.
And what is that website?
That is www.hudsonraiders.org. And you go to the top of the page, it's going to say, back to school blueprint, at the top, and you'll be able to click on that and see the most current up-to-date information of how we're going to operate.
All right, very good. Any other thoughts to add then, based on what we've discussed over the last 30 minutes or so?
No, I think, this is a challenging time. I mean, it's arguably one of the most challenging times education has had to deal with in the last 50 years. And, it's people have to bear with us as we try to work on these things. We're doing the best we can. We know that it's vitally important for us to provide education to our children, of our communities, and we're doing what we think is in the best interest. But we always know that there are going to be divergent opinions on things, and we understand that, and that's why we have some different options for people. If they feel like the face-to-face instruction is just really not for them, they still have that ability to have their children educated, but in a more virtual setting. So we're looking forward to getting school open again and getting kids back into our buildings and just getting things up and running. I mean, I think for most of our buildings, prior to July 6th being closed for basically 3.5, 4 months, that's the longest those buildings have gone without kids in them ever, probably since they've been constructed. So because even in the summer, typically we have lots of kids in our buildings. So.
All right. Well, we'll end it there. Thank you very much, Dr. Ouellette, for being on the show. Appreciate that. And also appreciate you folks watching. And again, if you have any questions, you can certainly contact the school district, but also please follow it on hudsonraiders.org. And also, when it comes to Western Wisconsin Journal, keep watching.